The night was colder than it had any right to be. Wind whistled through the cave mouth, dragging with it the scent of wet leaves and something more primal, fear. Somewhere beyond the black curtain of the forest, a predator coughed, low and throaty, the way only something with teeth to spare can cough. Inside, huddled under animal skins, the small group of humans did their best not to breathe too loudly. The darkness was absolute, so thick it felt like another skin. Every sound was magnified. The drip of water down the cave wall, the scurry of tiny feet across stone, the shifting weight of a restless hunter. One such hunter was Roka, whose inability to sleep had been a running joke among the tribe. He would joke back that the stars were his friends, and he had to stay awake to keep them company. But tonight there were no stars, only the oppressive dark. So before you enjoy the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Roka sat near the mouth of the cave, his hands busy with two stones. Not the sharp kind for cutting, but the hard, ugly kind that broke other rocks into sparks. He didn't fully know why he was doing it, perhaps to keep his hands from freezing or to distract himself from the fact that his bladder was one loud step away from betrayal. The air smelled of damp fur and tension. When the first spark leapt from the stones, it was small, nothing to write home about, if home had a writing system. It fizzled against a patch of dry moss and disappeared. But Roka's eyes widened. He struck again and again. This time, the spark found a cradle of dry fibers from an old bird's nest, and the nest coughed back a faint glow. It was not much, just a trembling point of orange, but in the suffocating dark, it was like a sunrise. He leaned closer, cupping his hands to shield the flicker from the wind. The warmth reached his fingertips and made him gasp. Heat that came from light. It was as absurd as finding a fish in a tree, and yet here it was. The glow grew, stretching tiny arms of flame, feeding greedily on the dry nest. It crackled softly, as if telling a secret. Behind him, a woman stirred. Mira, the tribe's gatherer and unofficial knower of strange things, sat up and blinked at the glow. "Roka," she whispered, "you're holding a piece of the sun." Her voice carried awe and suspicion in equal measure, because if stories had taught her anything, things that shone in the dark were rarely safe. The others woke in waves. First the children, then the hunters, then the elder who claimed to have once seen a mammoth sneeze. They gathered around, eyes wide, reaching cautious fingers toward the light. Some flinched at the warmth, others grinned, and one man promptly tried to eat it, which ended predictably. Here's the historically accurate part. Archaeologists believe early humans first harnessed fire from natural sources, lightning strikes, lava flows, long before they learned to make it themselves. But in our story, Roka's discovery was the moment of creation. Whether it was pure chance, muscle memory from a past observation, or the kind of stubborn curiosity that makes people lick frozen poles in winter, it changed everything. A lesser-known detail: some prehistoric groups may have carried burning embers wrapped in plant material during migrations, effectively making fire bundles that could last for hours or even days. Roka didn't know that yet, but as the nest burned dangerously close to his hands, he began to suspect that keeping this miracle alive was going to be harder than starting it. Outside, the forest still growled, and the dark still pressed in. But in the small circle of trembling orange light, something shifted. For the first time, the night did not belong entirely to the predators. It had competition now. The glow from Roka's tiny nest fire was fading fast, shrinking into a red-eyed coal that looked ready to blink shut forever. Panic rippled through the group. This was no ordinary stick or stone they could simply pick up again later. Mira, quick-thinking as ever, grabbed a bundle of dried grass from their bedding and dropped it onto the coal. It caught reluctantly, like a shy singer clearing their throat, and then, whoosh, it flared brighter than before. The tribe gasped, stumbling back a step. Fire was beautiful, yes, but it was also alive, and alive things bite when not treated right. The light danced on their faces, casting strange shadows that made them look like spirits from the stories the elder used to tell. Children laughed nervously, and one of them announced that Roka had pulled the sun out of the ground. He didn't correct them, Who wouldn't want that on their resume? They began testing it, each in their own way. One hunter waved a stick through the flame, watching it blacken and spark. Mira placed her cold hands close, sighing at the sudden rush of warmth. The elder leaned in so far that Roka had to pull him back by the furs, because setting the oldest member of the tribe on fire seemed like the kind of thing you couldn't explain away. Historical fact: early control of fire didn't just mean warmth, it meant cooking, which made food safer and easier to digest. It's believed this was a key factor in human evolution, giving us more energy for brain development. Roka, however, had no concept of this. He just knew his teeth ached less when the meat was softer, and that was reason enough. They experimented with feeding the fire. Twigs worked well. Green branches did not, producing thick smoke that made them cough and water-eyed. At one point, Mira tossed in a strip of dried fish, just to see what would happen. The smell was unforgettable. Let's just say if prehistoric humans had invented Yelp, that moment would have gotten a 1-star review. The tribe learned quickly that the fire was needy. Leave it alone, and it sulked into ash. Feed it too much too fast, and it roared, snapping at them like an ill-tempered wolf. They decided to assign one person at a time to guard the sun, as the children called it. Roka was given first shift, not because he was the discoverer, but because, as Mira pointed out, he was already awake all the time anyway. Lesser-known detail: some early groups believed fire had its own spirit, which could be offended if mishandled. They might speak to it, feed it offerings like animal fat or special wood, and even apologize when it smoked too much. That night, Mira whispered to the flames as if greeting an honored guest, while one boy bowed before it dramatically, nearly falling into the embers. The hours passed, and the fire became part of them. They huddled closer, the warmth seeping into tired muscles, the light painting the cave walls with shapes that flickered and danced. One young hunter used a charred stick to draw a crude mammoth on the rock. "So it will know we are not afraid," he said, though his hands shook when another predator's howl echoed from the forest. And still, the fire burned. It was no longer just a flicker in the darkness. It was the heart of the tribe, and everyone could feel it. Outside, the wind howled, but the shadows at the cave's mouth seemed to hesitate now, as if unsure about crossing the invisible line between danger and safety. Roka, watching the flames sway, felt something new stir inside him. It wasn't just warmth or light. It was the realization that the night could be changed, bent to human will. The darkness no longer felt endless. It could be broken and maybe, just maybe, controlled. By the second night, the fire had a personality. It hissed when damp wood was offered, purred when fed with dry branches, and spat sparks like tiny stars when overexcited. The tribe had begun speaking about it as if it were a member of the family. "Feed her," someone would say. "She's sleeping," another would warn. Even the elder claimed the fire whispered his name, though that might have been the wind and a little ego. It didn't take long for them to test what this new tribe member could do beyond warming cold fingers. The moment came when a pair of eyes, glinting yellow in the dark, appeared just beyond the cave's edge. It was a spotted predator, lean and deliberate, the kind of cat that had been stealing their kills for years. The hunters gripped their stone-tipped spears, but Roka had another idea. He snatched up a burning branch, the end glowing and sputtering, and stepped forward. The cat froze, tail lashing. The firelight carved strange shapes over its sleek fur, and for a heartbeat, predator and prey simply stared at each other. Then, with a hiss that almost matched the fire's, the cat turned and melted into the night. Gasps filled the cave. This was the first time any of them had seen a beast choose retreat over attack. Historical fact: evidence suggests early humans used fire to keep predators at bay during the night. Campfires served as both a psychological and physical barrier against animals that normally hunted under cover of darkness. For our tribe, this was more than a theory, it was a revolution. From then on, they took turns holding burning torches when venturing just outside the cave. Water was fetched without the usual creeping fear, and meat could be guarded instead of stolen. They even dared to sleep a little deeper, though Mira insisted someone always watch the shadows. "The cats are clever," she said. They'll pretend they're gone, then come back when you yawn. In their experiments, they discovered fire's double nature. It could protect, yes, but it could also destroy. One careless moment, dropping a torch onto a pile of dry grass, and they found themselves waving furs at the flames to stop it from swallowing their bedding. The smell of singed hair, from both bedding and one unfortunate hunter's arm, lingered for hours. A strange and lesser-known detail: some birds of prey in the natural world, like the black kite, have been observed carrying burning sticks to flush out prey from hiding. Whether any prehistoric humans ever learned from such birds is unknown, but Roka, watching the fire's reach, wondered if they could use it in hunts. Mira reminded him that last time they tried something new with fire, they nearly cooked the elder's leg, so maybe not yet. The real magic came in the evenings. Once the darkness pressed in and the forest's chorus rose, the fire became the center of something more than survival. They began telling stories, not the rushed kind whispered in fear, but long, meandering tales that swelled with each telling. The flames turned the cave walls into moving canvases, shadows leaping and bowing in rhythm with the storyteller's voice. Roka noticed something else. In firelight, faces looked different. The lines of worry softened. The eyes reflected more than they concealed. Even laughter came easier, perhaps because the fire made them feel like the night was theirs. Once, a child threw a bundle of dry leaves into the flames just to see them burst into a rain of sparks, and everyone, hunters, elders, even Mira, laughed until their sides ached. The predators still prowled outside. Their eyes still shone from the darkness. But now the tribe met those stares with the confidence of creatures who had stolen a piece of the sky and learned to hold it in their hands. Days became weeks, and the fire was no longer a novelty. It was an expectation. Mornings began with the keepers stirring embers back to life, coaxing them with dry twigs until the flames stood tall again. Even the children, who once feared touching the fire, now argued over whose turn it was to carry a torch when the hunters went out. It was as if the tribe had adopted a guardian that demanded constant care but repaid them with protection, warmth, and, perhaps most important, light. With light came possibilities. Meat that had to be eaten raw and fast could now be cooked, lasting longer before it spoiled. Roots and tubers that had been too tough to chew softened over the flames, releasing flavors they didn't know existed. Mira discovered that the bitter berries she'd gathered became sweet when warmed, though the experiment with roasting mushrooms ended in everyone agreeing that some plants were better left to the deer. Historical fact: the use of fire for cooking didn't just make food taste better, it unlocked more nutrients, giving early humans the energy to travel farther, hunt longer, and think faster. The tribe didn't know the science, but they felt the change in their bones. Hunger no longer ruled every moment of the day, and with that freedom came time to plan. They began carrying fire beyond the cave. Using bundles of smoldering wood wrapped in thick leaves, they brought it to new campsites, to the riverbank where fish were smoked instead of eaten raw, even to the foot of the hunting grounds where they tested the idea of driving game toward a line of flames. Some hunts succeeded brilliantly. Others ended with everyone smelling like burnt fur and no meat to show for it. The lesser-known detail: once, in the middle of the night, a thunderstorm drenched their fire completely. Panic swept through the tribe, not because they feared the cold alone, but because they didn't yet know how to make fire from scratch reliably. They spent 2 long days searching the forest for embers left by lightning strikes, and when they finally rekindled the flames, they treated it like a homecoming feast. From that day forward, at least 2 people guarded it day and night. But fire's greatest gift wasn't just in the warmth or the cooked food or the safety from predators. It was in what it did to the night. Before, darkness had been a wall, solid, impenetrable, something you pushed against until morning came. Now, night was a canvas. They painted it with dancing shadows, filled it with laughter, and carved out pockets of safety where stories could be told without fear. The elder began calling this change the night that never returned. It wasn't that darkness was gone. It still covered the land each evening. But the total, suffocating kind of dark, the one that made every rustle feel like claws at your back, had been broken forever. Even on moonless nights, they could light the cave, the forest edge, or a lonely trail with the same warm glow that had first sprung from Roka's stubborn stones. And so, life transformed. The predators still prowled. The seasons still turned. But now the tribe had something no claw or tooth could match: control over the one thing that had always belonged to the wilderness. Fire was no longer just a spark in the shadows. It was theirs. Roka, sitting by the flames one quiet evening, thought back to the moment it began. How small the spark had been. How easily it could have gone out. He smiled at the thought that the greatest change in their lives had fit, at first, in the palm of his hand. The night still came, as it always had. But for the first time in human history, it did not win.